When Elena Russo discovered she was pregnant with the child of the most dangerous man in the city, her ex-husband, she made a choice that would change everything. 3 months after walking away from their shattered marriage, she stands in a parking lot at midnight, unaware that Marco Valenti has been watching her every move, protecting her from the shadows. Tonight, their carefully maintained distance will collapse. Tonight, secrets will surface that neither can survive alone. This is their story, a tale of broken trust, devastating truths, and a love powerful enough to transform an empire built on blood into something worth believing in. If you're ready to discover whether love can truly conquer the darkness, stay with me until the end. And when you do, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital flickered overhead as Elena Russo pushed her cleaning cart down the deserted third-floor corridor. It was nearly midnight, and the building had settled into that particular kind of silence that only came in the hours between visiting time and the morning shift change. Her rubber-soled shoes squeaked softly against the linoleum, a rhythmic soundtrack to thoughts she couldn't quiet. 3 months. 3 months since she'd walked out of the Valenti mansion with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart so shattered she wasn't sure all the pieces would ever fit together again. 3 months since she'd discovered, or thought she'd discovered, that Marco had betrayed her with someone else. 3 months of surviving in a studio apartment in the worst part of the city, working night shifts as a hospital cleaner, trying to become invisible in a world where she'd once moved through penthouses and charity galas like she belonged. Invisibility, she'd learned, was easier than she'd expected. When you wore a maintenance uniform and kept your eyes down, people looked right through you. It was a relief, mostly. No one here knew she'd been Elena Valenti for 18 months, the wife of the most feared man in the city. No one knew that the simple gold band she still wore on a chain beneath her scrubs had once symbolized a love she'd believed could redeem even the darkest soul. She'd been naive, foolish, desperate to believe that Marco Valenti, a man whose name made grown men pale, could change for her. That the tenderness he showed her in private could somehow outweigh the violence that built his empire. That love, their love, could be different from the cold transactions that passed for relationships in his world. The image that destroyed everything flashed through her mind again, unbidden and unwelcome. Marco, standing too close to a beautiful woman with dark hair and red lips, his hand on her waist, the intimate way she'd touched his face. Elena had been shopping for anniversary dinner ingredients when she had seen them through the window of an upscale restaurant. She hadn't stayed to see more, hadn't asked questions. She'd simply known, with the terrible certainty of every woman who'd ever loved a dangerous man, that she'd been a fool to think she could be enough. So she'd run, left a note, filed divorce papers through a lawyer she could barely afford. And Marco, to her surprise and secret heartbreak, had let her go without a fight. The papers had been signed within a week. Clean, efficient, exactly what she'd asked for, exactly what was killing her. Elena pushed the cart into the break room, her hands moving automatically through the familiar motions of emptying trash, wiping down surfaces, restocking supplies. The work was mind-numbing, which was precisely what she needed. Every moment spent thinking about Marco was a moment wasted on a past she couldn't change, and a future that would never include him. She was pulling a fresh liner over the trash can when she heard it, a sound so unexpected in the sterile silence that she froze. Someone was crying. Not the loud, desperate sobs of fresh grief, but the quiet, exhausted weeping of someone who'd been crying for so long, they had nothing left but tears. Elena hesitated. It wasn't her job to comfort anyone. She was maintenance, not medical staff. But something in the sound pulled at her, a raw vulnerability that resonated with the grief she carried like a second skin. Following the sound, she found herself outside room 347. The door was cracked open, and through the gap she could see the dim glow of a bedside lamp. She shouldn't look. She should walk away, finish her shift, go home to her empty apartment, and the secret she'd been carrying for 2 weeks now, a secret that changed everything and nothing at the same time. But her hand was already pushing the door open wider, her eyes adjusting to the low light. And then her entire world tilted on its axis. Marco Valenti sat beside a hospital bed, his powerful frame folded into a chair meant for someone half his size. He held the hand of the woman lying there, a woman Elena recognized with a jolt of shock. Isabella Moretti. The woman from the restaurant. The woman who'd destroyed Elena's marriage. But nothing about this scene matched the narrative Elena had constructed in her mind. Marco's head was bowed, his shoulders rounded in a posture of defeat Elena had never seen from him. Isabella looked nothing like she had that day, vibrant and beautiful and too close to Elena's husband. Now she was gaunt, her skin the color of old paper, her breathing shallow and labored. "I'm sorry," Marco was saying, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you, that I couldn't find them in time, that I failed Lucia the way I failed—" His voice cracked. "The way I failed everyone who ever trusted me." Isabella's eyes fluttered open. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "You didn't fail, Marco. You gave Lucia 5 more years. 5 years she wouldn't have had if you hadn't—" A coughing fit interrupted her, harsh and wet. Marco lifted a cup of water to her lips with infinite gentleness, supporting her head with his other hand. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "For what?" Isabella managed a weak smile. "We both know there's nothing left to save it for. But you still have a chance. Elena, don't." The word was sharp with pain. "She's gone. She's better off gone. You're a fool if you believe that." Isabella's eyes, still sharp despite the ravages of illness, fixed on Marco's face. "She didn't leave because she stopped loving you. She left because she thought—" "He thought exactly what everyone thinks about me," Marco interrupted. "That I'm a monster who destroys everything he touches. And she was right. She was wrong." Isabella's grip on his hand tightened with surprising strength. "You saved Lucia when no one else could. You hunted down every man who hurt her, who took her, who—" Her breath hitched. "You did what the police wouldn't do, what her own father couldn't do. You brought my daughter back to me." "For 5 years," Marco said bitterly. 5 years before the cancer took her. 5 years before it started taking you. 5 years I wouldn't trade for anything." Tears slipped down Isabella's temples. "Do you know what those years meant? Watching Lucia graduate high school, seeing her fall in love, dancing at her wedding, holding my grandson before—" Her voice broke. "You gave me that, Marco. You gave me everything that mattered." Elena's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so different from what she'd believed that shame burned hot in her chest. Lucia. She remembered that name. A kidnapping 5 years ago that had dominated the news for weeks before the girl was found. The details had been sparse, but Elena remembered the basics. A teenage girl taken by traffickers, recovered before the worst could happen, returned to her mother. She hadn't known Marco was involved, hadn't known because he'd never told her, never mentioned it. The same way he'd never mentioned so many things about the real work he did, the work that wasn't about power or profit, but about the kind of justice the system couldn't or wouldn't deliver. "Elena saw us together," Marco was saying now, his voice hollow. "That day at Marcello's, she saw me holding you, touching you. She thought what anyone would think, seeing something without context." Isabella's breathing was growing more labored. "But you never told her, never explained. Why, Marco? Why did you let her believe the worst?" "Because she was right to leave." The words came out like broken glass. "I am everything she feared, everything she should run from. She deserves someone who can give her a normal life, safety, peace, not a man with blood on his hands and enemies who would use her to hurt me." "She deserves the truth," Isabella countered. "She deserves to make her own choices with all the information. You took that from her when you stayed silent." "I protected her." "You broke her heart." Isabella's eyes drifted closed. "Just like you're breaking your own. Lucia used to say—" She paused, gathering strength. "She used to say that you were proof that good men could do dark things for the right reasons, that the measure of a man wasn't the violence he was capable of, but what he chose to do with that capability. She admired you, Marco. Even at the end, when the pain was worst, she said she was grateful, that you'd given her mother the gift of time." "It wasn't enough time," Marco said roughly. "It never is." Isabella's hand went slack in his, but it was precious. Every moment was precious. "Don't waste yours, Marco. Don't let pride or fear or guilt rob you of whatever time you could have with the woman you love. Life is too short. too fragile, too... Her breathing changed, becoming rapid and shallow. Marco straightened, his hand finding the call button. "I'll get the nurse," he said, but Isabella caught his wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise me you'll tell her the truth, all of it, that you'll fight for her the way you fought for Lucia, the way you've been fighting for me." "Isabella, promise me, Marco. Let something good come from all this pain." "I promise," he said, and even from where Elena stood frozen in the doorway, she could hear the weight of that vow. "I promise I'll make it right." Isabella's hand fell away, her eyes closed, and the monitor beside the bed began to emit a steady, unforgiving tone that Elena knew meant everything had just changed. Marco didn't move, didn't call out. He simply sat there, still holding Isabella's hand, his head bowing lower as if the weight of grief was physically crushing him. And Elena, who had spent 3 months hating him, resenting him, trying desperately to forget him, felt her heart crack open all over again. She'd been wrong, so terribly, completely wrong. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her hip catching the doorframe, and the sound, small as it was, cut through the room like a gunshot. Marco's head snapped up. Their eyes met across the dim space, and Elena watched shock, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously like hope flash across his face in rapid succession. "Elena!" Her name on his lips was a prayer and a question and an accusation all at once. She should say something, anything, but her throat had closed, and all she could do was shake her head and run. She ran through the corridors, abandoning her cleaning cart, not caring who saw or what they thought. She ran down 3 flights of stairs, through the lobby, out into the parking lot, where her battered Honda waited in the furthest, darkest corner. Her hands shook so badly she could barely get the key in the lock. She'd been wrong. She'd seen them together and jumped to the worst conclusion, never once considering that there might be an innocent explanation. Never once asking Marco for the truth because she'd been so certain she knew it. She'd walked away from her marriage without a conversation, without a fight, because she'd been too afraid to face the possibility that she'd been a fool to believe in him in the first place. And she had been a fool, but not in the way she'd thought. The car door finally opened. Elena threw herself inside, gasping for air that wouldn't come, her mind racing through 3 months of memories with this devastating new context. Marco letting her go without a fight, the divorce papers signed so quickly, his silence in the face of her accusations. He'd let her believe the worst about him. Let her walk away. Because he thought she was better off without him. Because he believed he was the monster she'd accused him of being. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes, but the tears came anyway, hot and bitter. She'd made a terrible mistake. She'd destroyed everything because she'd been too scared to ask a simple question, too convinced of her own righteousness to consider that she might not have the full story. And now there was another complication, one that made everything infinitely more complex. She was pregnant. 2 weeks ago, she'd stood in the cramped bathroom of her apartment, staring at a plastic stick that had just rewritten her entire future. Pregnant, with Marco's child. A child conceived in the final weeks of their marriage, before everything fell apart. A child he didn't know existed. A child she'd convinced herself he could never know about. Because what would he do if he found out? Would he use it to control her? Would he demand custody? Would he see the baby as just another piece of his empire, another asset to protect and manage? Or worse, would he see it as a burden, a complication from a marriage he'd been happy to end? Elena didn't know, and not knowing terrified her more than anything else. She'd planned to leave the city, start over somewhere far away where the Valenti name meant nothing, and she could raise her child in peace. She'd been saving every penny from her hospital paychecks, researching small towns in other states, making lists of what she'd need for a fresh start. But now, after what she'd just witnessed, everything was different. Now she knew the truth. Marco wasn't the man she'd thought he was when she left. He wasn't cheating on her with Isabella Moretti. He was honoring a promise to a dying woman and the daughter he'd saved from a fate worse than death. He was carrying burdens he'd never shared with Elena, protecting people she'd never known about, doing work that had nothing to do with power or profit and everything to do with a moral code she'd never understood, because he'd never let her see it. A knock on the car window made her scream. She whipped around to find Marco standing beside her car, his expression unreadable in the harsh fluorescent light of the parking lot. He was still wearing the same dark suit, but now she noticed the details she'd missed in her shock. The hollows beneath his eyes, the new lines around his mouth, the weight of exhaustion in his shoulders. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in months. He looked like a man who'd been destroyed and was still standing anyway. Elena's hand went to the lock, then stopped. She couldn't run anymore, couldn't keep hiding from the truth or the consequences of her actions. She'd made a mistake, a catastrophic, marriage-ending mistake, and she owed him at least an explanation, even if it destroyed her to give it. She unlocked the door. Marco pulled it open, then crouched beside the car so they were at eye level. Up close, she could see the redness in his eyes, the tracks of tears he hadn't bothered to hide. "How long were you standing there?" His voice was quiet, carefully neutral. "Long enough," Elena whispered. "Long enough to understand." Her voice broke. "Marco, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I never asked, never gave you a chance to explain. I saw you with her and I thought, you thought exactly what I would have thought in your position." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was electric, familiar, devastating. "You thought I was like every other man in my world, that I couldn't be faithful, that I'd used you and discarded you the moment someone more interesting came along." "I should have known better," Elena said. "I should have trusted you." "Why?" The question was genuinely curious. "I never told you about Isabella, about Lucia, about any of the work I do that isn't about the business. I kept secrets, Elena. Important secrets. I kept you separate from that part of my life because I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was make sure you didn't have the full picture. Make sure you'd fill in the blanks with your worst fears." "You were protecting a dying woman's privacy," Elena countered. "Her daughter's trauma. That wasn't yours to share." "Maybe." Marco's hand fell away from her face. "But there were other things I should have told you, other truths you deserved to know. I thought keeping you separate from the darkness would keep you safe. Instead, it just kept you blind." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on both of them. Finally, Elena forced herself to ask the question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. "Why did you let me go? When I filed for divorce, why didn't you fight it? Why didn't you make me stay and listen?" Marco's laugh was bitter. "Because I loved you too much to trap you in a cage, Elena. Even if that cage was a marriage you wanted to escape. You left because you thought I'd betrayed you. But the truth is, I've been betraying you since the day we met. Betraying your trust by keeping secrets. Betraying your dreams of a normal life by being exactly what I am. Betraying your hope that I could be something better by drowning in all the ways I've failed to protect the people who mattered." "You saved Lucia," Elena said fiercely. "You gave Isabella 5 more years with her daughter. You kept your promise even though it cost you—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't say, "cost you our marriage," because she'd been the one to end it. She'd been the one who ran. "It wasn't enough," Marco said flatly. "Lucia died anyway. Isabella's dying now. And you're here working as a cleaning woman in a hospital because I couldn't give you what you needed. Couldn't be what you needed. So yes, Elena, I let you go. Because loving you meant letting you be free of me." The words hung between them, sharp and painful. Elena wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she'd never wanted to be free of him. But 3 months ago, hadn't that been exactly what she'd wanted? Hadn't she been desperate to escape the suffocating reality of being Marco Valenti's wife? Except she hadn't been suffocating because of Marco. She'd been suffocating because she hadn't understood what his world truly was. What he truly was. She'd built a version of him in her mind, a dangerous man trying to be good for her sake, and when that version was challenged, she'd run instead of looking deeper. "I saw you tonight," Marco said quietly. "In the hospital. I've been coming here every night for 2 weeks, sitting with Isabella, making sure she's not alone at the end. And tonight, I saw you pushing that cleaning cart down the hallway, and I thought I was hallucinating. Thought grief was making me see things that weren't there. But it was you. Really you." "I've been working here for 6 weeks," Elena admitted. "Night shift. It pays better, and I needed—" She stopped. She'd almost said I needed to save money to leave the city, to disappear with Marco's child before he could ever know it existed. The secret burned in her throat, demanding to be spoken. But fear held her silent. Fear of what he'd do with the information. Fear of what it would mean for her carefully constructed plans. Fear that once he knew, she'd never be free again. But what did freedom mean anyway? Freedom to raise a child alone, lying every day about who their father was? Freedom to run from the only man she'd ever loved because she was too scared to trust him with the truth? You needed what? Marco prompted gently. Elena closed her eyes. This was it. The moment where everything changed or ended or both. The moment where she either told the truth and faced the consequences or lied and lived with the weight of that deception for the rest of her life. She thought of Isabella's words. Life is too short, too fragile. She thought of Lucia, who'd only had 5 years after being saved. She thought of all the time she and Marco had wasted in the last 3 months because neither of them had been brave enough to speak the truth. I'm pregnant, she said, the words tumbling out before courage could desert her. 8 weeks. It's yours. Was yours. Is yours. I don't know the right tense for this situation, but Marco, I'm pregnant with your child. The silence that followed was absolute. Marco's face went completely blank, every emotion shuddering away behind the controlled mask he showed the rest of the world. Elena watched him process the information, watched the implications play across his features too quickly to interpret. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. You weren't going to tell me. It wasn't a question. Elena couldn't bring herself to lie. No, I wasn't. I was going to leave the city, start over somewhere you'd never find us. I thought you'd use it against me. Use the baby to control me or take them away, or maybe I'd want to be a father, Marco interrupted, and now there was heat in his voice, anger and hurt, and something that sounded like grief. Maybe I'd want to be part of my child's life. Maybe I'd want to try again with you, to fix what we broke, to build something better than what we had. You signed the divorce papers, Elena shot back. You let me go without a fight. You made it clear you were done with our marriage. I signed the papers because you asked me to. Marco's control finally cracked. Because you were so determined to be free of me that fighting you felt like another way I'd failed you. But done with our marriage? Done with you? Elena, I've spent every day of the last 3 months trying to figure out how to breathe without you. How to get through a morning without reaching for you in bed. How to eat a meal that doesn't taste like ashes because you're not there to share it. He stood abruptly, pacing away from the car, his hands going to his hair. When he turned back, his expression was raw. I've been following you, making sure you were safe, making sure no one from my world came looking to use you against me. I knew where you lived, where you worked, what route you took home. I knew, and I stayed away because I thought that was what you wanted, what you needed. You've been watching me? Elena didn't know whether to be angry or touched. I couldn't stop, Marco admitted. I told myself it was for your protection, that I just needed to make sure you were safe. But the truth is I couldn't let you go completely, couldn't cut the tie, even though you'd made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me. I was wrong, Elena said, about everything, about what I saw, about what you are, about what we could have been if I just asked instead of assuming the worst. You were protecting yourself, Marco countered, from a man who'd done nothing to earn your trust, who'd kept too many secrets and expected you to love him blindly anyway. I did love you, Elena whispered. I never stopped. Marco's eyes closed. Don't say that unless you mean it, unless you're willing to... He stopped, his jaw working. There's a child now. My child. That changes everything. I know. The divorce, it's not final yet. There's a waiting period, 90 days. Marco's eyes opened, fixing on her with laser focus. We could stop it, tear up the papers, try again. Because of the baby? Elena asked, and she couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. Because you feel obligated? Because I never wanted to end our marriage in the first place, Marco said fiercely. The baby just gives me a reason to fight for what I should have been fighting for all along. You, us, the life we could have if we both stopped running from the truth. Elena's heart was racing. What truth? That we're better together than apart. That we love each other enough to be honest, even when it's hard. That we can build something real if we stop keeping secrets and start trusting each other with the whole truth. Not just the pretty parts, but all of it. The darkness and the light, the mistakes and the triumphs. Everything. It was the right answer. The perfect answer. But Elena had been burned before by believing in perfect answers. What about your enemies, she asked. The people who'd use me, use our child, to hurt you? I'll protect you, Marco said immediately. Both of you, whatever it takes. With violence? The question hung in the air. Marco's face tightened. If necessary. I won't lie to you, Elena. There are people in my world who only understand one language, who won't be deterred by anything less than overwhelming force. If someone threatens my family, I will end them, permanently. That's what I'm afraid of, Elena said softly. Not that you can't protect us, but that in protecting us, you'll become the monster you're so afraid of being, that you'll cross lines you can't uncross, and our child will grow up with a father who what? Who does what needs to be done? Marco's voice was hard now. You want guarantees, Elena? You want me to promise I'll never use violence, never make hard choices, never get my hands dirty? I can't give you that. I can only promise that every choice I make will be about keeping you and our child safe, about building a future where you don't have to be afraid. I'm not afraid of you, Elena said. I'm afraid for you. I'm afraid you'll lose yourself trying to protect us, that you'll wake up one day and realize you've become everything you fought against. Marco crouched beside the car again, taking her hands in his. His grip was firm but gentle, grounding. Then help me, he said quietly. Help me find another way. You've always seen possibilities I couldn't see, solutions I never considered. If there's a way to protect our family without becoming a monster, help me find it. It was a leap of faith, a request for partnership in the truest sense. Marco Valenti, the most feared man in the city, asking her, a hospital cleaning woman he'd been married to for 18 months, to help him navigate the impossible space between protecting his family and preserving his humanity. Elena thought of Isabella's words again. The measure of a man wasn't the violence he was capable of, but what he chose to do with that capability. Marco was capable of terrible violence. She'd always known that. But he was also capable of sitting with a dying woman night after night, keeping a promise to a girl he'd saved years ago. Capable of letting the woman he loved walk away because he thought it was what she needed. Capable of asking for help instead of assuming he had all the answers. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. Okay, she said. Okay. We try again. We stop the divorce. We figure this out together. But Marco, no more secrets. Not about the baby. Not about your work. Not about anything. If we're doing this, we do it with total honesty. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. No more secrets, Marco agreed. Starting now. What do you need to know? Everything, Elena thought. But that could wait. Right now, there was only one question that mattered. Do you really want this baby? Want to be a father? Because if you're just doing this out of obligation... Marco leaned forward and kissed her, cutting off the question. It was soft and desperate and full of 3 months' worth of longing and regret and hope. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I want everything, he said. The baby. You. The chance to build a family with the woman I love. The chance to be better than what I was. To prove that monsters can change if they have the right reason. You're my reason, Elena. You and our child. You've always been my reason. It was too much, too fast. After 3 months of radio silence, they were suddenly talking about reconciliation and family and futures Elena had thought were lost forever. But as Marco helped her out of the car and pulled her into his arms, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe they could do this. Maybe they could build something real from the wreckage of their first attempt. Maybe love really was enough, as long as it was backed up by honesty and trust and a willingness to keep trying even when things got hard. Or maybe they'd fail spectacularly and hurt each other all over again. But as Elena buried her face in Marco's chest and felt his arms tighten around her, she realized she was willing to take that risk. Willing to bet on the possibility of happiness instead of the certainty of loneliness. Willing to fight for the family they could become instead of mourning the marriage they'd lost. Let's go home, Marco murmured into her hair. Let's start over. Do it right this time. Home. Elena tested the word, and for the first time in 3 months, it didn't hurt. Yes, she said. Let's go home. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the parking lot. Neither of them saw the phone raised to capture their embrace. Neither of them realized that while they'd been confessing truths and making promises, someone else had been listening. Someone who had very different plans for the future of Marco Valenti and his unexpected family. Someone who would make sure their second chance never got off the ground. The Valenti mansion looked exactly as Elena remembered it. Imposing iron gates, manicured grounds that stretched into darkness, and the sprawling stone structure that had once felt like a prison disguised as paradise. Now, pulling through those gates in Marco's car, she felt something different. Not quite belonging, but not quite fear either. Something suspended between the two, fragile as morning frost. Marco's hand found hers across the console. We don't have to do this tonight. I can take you back to your apartment, give you time to think. No. Elena's grip tightened. I've spent 3 months thinking, 3 months running. I'm done with both. The car stopped in the circular drive. Marco came around to open her door, a gesture he'd always insisted on during their marriage. Elena had found it old-fashioned then, almost stifling. Tonight she let him help her out, recognizing it for what it was. Not control, but care. The front door opened before they reached it. Thomas, Marco's head of security, stood in the entrance, his weathered face carefully neutral. But Elena caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes when he saw her, saw Marco's hand at the small of her back. Sir, Mrs. Valenti. He nodded to each of them in turn, and Elena didn't correct the title she'd thought she'd left behind. Thomas. Marco's voice carried quiet authority. Elena will be staying, indefinitely. Make sure everyone knows she's to be given complete access and privacy. No questions, no reports unless she requests them. Of course, sir. Thomas stepped aside, but as Elena passed, he caught her eye. What she saw there surprised her, relief, maybe even approval. It's good to have you home, ma'am. The words shouldn't have mattered. Thomas was Marco's employee, paid to be loyal, but they settled something in Elena's chest anyway, some small piece of validation she hadn't known she needed. Inside, the house was exactly as she'd left it. Same marble floors, same expensive art on the walls, same subtle scent of cedar and leather that had always meant Marco. But it felt different now, seeing it through eyes that understood more about the man who lived here. This wasn't just a showcase of wealth and power. It was a fortress, a place built to keep threats out and the people Marco cared about safe. She'd lived here for 18 months and never truly seen it, months. Marco led her up the familiar staircase, past guest rooms and offices, to the master suite they'd shared. He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. I haven't changed anything, he said quietly. Couldn't bring myself to. Your things are still in the closet, your books on the nightstand. I kept thinking, hoping. He didn't finish. Elena understood. He'd kept it as a shrine to what they'd lost. Or maybe as a promise to himself that it wasn't really over. The room was exactly as she remembered. The massive bed with its dark gray comforter, the sitting area by the windows overlooking the grounds, the ensuite bathroom with its ridiculous soaking tub that could fit 4 people, all of it familiar and foreign at once. I'll take one of the guest rooms, Marco said, misreading her silence. Give you space, we can figure out the rest tomorrow. Stay. The word came out before Elena could second guess it. Please, I don't want to be alone tonight. Something shifted in Marco's expression, hope warring with caution. Are you sure? No, Elena admitted. I'm not sure about anything right now, but I'm sure I don't want to spend another night wondering what might have been different if I'd just been brave enough to stay. They prepared for bed in careful silence, moving around each other like dancers learning a familiar routine again. Elena borrowed one of Marco's shirts, her own clothes still packed in boxes at her apartment. When she emerged from the bathroom, she found him standing by the windows, staring out at the dark grounds. I used to stand here every night, he said without turning. After you left, looking at those gates, wondering if you'd ever come back through them. Elena crossed to him, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. She felt him tense, then relax into her touch. I'm sorry, she whispered, for not asking, for not giving you a chance to explain, for believing the worst instead of... Stop! Marco turned in her arms. We both made mistakes, both kept secrets, both let fear make our decisions. But we're here now. That has to count for something. He was right. They were here. Together. with a child on the way and a chance to rebuild what they'd broken. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, as Marco led her to bed and pulled her against his chest, Elena felt something close to peace. She was almost asleep when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She considered ignoring it, but old habits died hard. Careful not to disturb Marco, she checked the screen. Unknown number. A text message with a single photo attached. Elena's blood went cold. It was them. In the hospital parking lot, Marco's arms around her. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., less than 2 hours ago, and below it, a message that made her stomach turn. Congratulations on the reconciliation. Marco's enemies will be so pleased to know he has more to lose now. What is it? Marco was suddenly awake, alert in the way that reminded Elena exactly what kind of man she'd married. She handed him the phone wordlessly, watched his face go hard as stone as he read the message. How did they... Elena's voice shook. We were only together for a few minutes. Who could have... Someone who's been watching. Marco was already moving, pulling on clothes, his phone to his ear. Thomas, I need a security sweep, full protocols. Someone was at St. Catherine's tonight with eyes on us. I want to know who and why. He paused, listening. No, don't wait for morning. Now. Elena sat up, pulling the blanket around herself. Marco, what does this mean? Who would... It means our reconciliation just became a target. Marco's voice was grim. It means whoever sent this knows you're pregnant or will figure it out soon enough. It means the clock just started ticking on how long we have before someone tries to use you and our child against me. Then we end it, Elena said, forcing her voice steady. We announce the divorce is back on. I go back to my apartment. We pretend tonight never happened. No. The word was absolute. I'm not losing you again. Not to threats, not to fear, not to anything. Even if staying together puts our baby at risk? The question hung between them, sharp and terrible. Marco's jaw worked, his hands clenching and unclenching. We don't know who sent this, he said finally. Could be a bluff. Someone fishing for information, could be serious. Either way, running isn't the answer. It just shows weakness. Tells whoever's watching that they can control us through fear. So what do? We find out who's behind this. Marco's eyes were cold now, the warmth from earlier completely gone, and we make it very clear that threatening my family is the last mistake they'll ever make. Marcos, Elena started, but he cut her off. I know what you're going to say. That violence isn't the answer. That becoming the monster to fight monsters makes me just as bad. And you're right. But Elena, there are people in my world who only understand one thing, who see mercy as weakness and compassion as an invitation to attack. If I don't respond to this, if I let it slide, it opens the door for every other enemy to think they can come at me through you. He was right. Elena hated it, but he was right. This wasn't her old world where threats got reported to police and restraining orders meant something. This was Marco's world, where power was the only currency that mattered and showing vulnerability could get you killed. But there had to be another way, some option between rolling over and becoming the very thing they were trying to escape. What if we didn't hide? Elena said slowly, an idea forming. What if we went public, really public? Made our reconciliation and the pregnancy impossible to target because everyone would be watching. Marco frowned. That would make you more of a target, not less. Would it? Elena stood pacing now as her thoughts raced. Think about it. Right now, I'm a secret. Something that can be taken quietly, used as leverage without anyone knowing. But if we announce it, make it a story, make me visible, then what? Any attack on me becomes an attack on Marco Valenti's pregnant wife in front of the whole city. What kind of message does that send about the attacker's power? That they're so desperate they're going after women and children? She could see Marco processing this, his tactical mind running through scenarios. You're talking about painting a target on yourself. I'm talking about making the target so bright that no one would be stupid enough to shoot at it. Your enemies respect power, right? Strength? What's stronger than publicly claiming what's yours and daring anyone to challenge it? It's risky. Everything about us is risky, Elena countered. But at least this way we control the narrative. We choose how the story gets told instead of letting someone else write it for us. Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Thomas found something. Security footage from the hospital. Someone in a dark sedan watching us. Professional setup. Camera with a telephoto lens. They were there for at least an hour before we came out. So they knew we'd both be there, Elena said, the implication settling cold in her stomach. They were waiting, which means they've been tracking at least one of us, maybe both. Marco's hands fisted. I need to make some calls, figure out who has the resources and motivation to… It's almost 2 a.m, Elena interrupted. Whatever you need to do can wait 6 hours. Right now, we both need sleep. We need to be sharp if we're going to handle this. I can't sleep knowing someone's out there. Then don't sleep, Elena said, but at least lie down. Let yourself rest, even if your mind won't shut off. Because tomorrow, today, we're going to need to be at our best. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion was written in every line of his face. How many nights had he spent like this? Elena wondered. Awake and vigilant, carrying the weight of an empire on his shoulders, never allowing himself to be vulnerable even for a moment. She took his hand, tugging him back toward the bed. Come on, I'll stay awake with you if that's what it takes. But you're not facing this alone anymore. That's what tonight was about, wasn't it? Being partners, trusting each other. Something in her words got through. Marco allowed himself to be pulled down beside her, though his body remained tense, ready to spring into action at the slightest threat. Elena curled against him, her head on his chest, listening to the too fast beat of his heart. Tell me about Lucia, she said quietly. Tell me the whole story. Not because I need to know, but because you need to tell it. Because keeping it locked inside is destroying you. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his arms tightened around her and he began to speak. She was 16. Isabella's only child. Her husband, Lucia's father, died when she was young. Some kind of construction accident. Isabella raised her alone, working double shifts as a nurse to make ends meet. By all accounts, Lucia was brilliant. Straight A's, college scholarships already coming in. The kind of kid who could have done anything she wanted. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Elena could hear the pain underneath. She was walking home from the library one night when they took her. 3 men in a van grabbed her off the street in broad daylight, and no one did a damn thing. No one saw. No one helped. By the time Isabella realized something was wrong, they were already gone. The police got involved, but he laughed bitterly. You know how that goes. Missing girl from a poor neighborhood. They did the paperwork, but their hearts weren't in it. Too many other cases, too few resources, too little hope. How did you get involved? Elena asked. Isabella knew my mother, Marco said. Years ago, before my mother died. They'd worked together at the same hospital. When the police weren't getting anywhere, Isabella came to me. Begged me to help. Offered me everything she had, which was nothing. I told her to keep her money. Told her I'd find Lucia. And you did. Not fast enough. The words were rough with self-recrimination. It took 4 days. 4 days while they… He stopped, his jaw working. By the time we found her, she'd been sold twice. Moved to 3 different locations. The things they did to her… His voice broke. Elena held him tighter, willing her presence to be enough when words weren't. We got her out, Marco continued. Killed every single man who'd touched her. Burned their operation to the ground. Brought Lucia home to her mother. But she wasn't. She came back different. How could she not? What they'd done to her, the trauma, it changed her. She tried to move on, tried to reclaim her life. And she did, in a lot of ways. Graduated high school, went to college, even got married to a good man who loved her despite everything. But the cancer? Elena whispered. The cancer. Marco's voice was hollow. Started 3 years after we got her back. Ovarian? The doctor said it was aggressive, probably triggered by the trauma and stress. We tried everything, surgery, chemo, experimental treatments. Threw money at it like money could fix it. But it just kept spreading. She fought for 2 years before it finally took her. And Isabella, watching her daughter die, knowing she'd survived trafficking only to be killed by her own body. It destroyed something in her. Started smoking again, stopped taking care of herself. When her own cancer diagnosis came 6 months later, I wasn't surprised. He swallowed hard. Just devastated. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks, soaking into Marco's shirt. You've been carrying this alone. All of it. The guilt, the grief, the weight of not being able to save them. I did save them, Marco said. That's what kills me. I did everything right. Found Lucia in time, got her the best care, supported them both financially, emotionally, every way I could, and it still wasn't enough. They still died. So what's the point of all this power, all this control, if I can't protect the people who matter? It was the question at the heart of everything, Elena realized. The question that drove Marco to build walls and keep secrets and push away anyone who got too close. If his power couldn't save the people he cared about, what good was it? And if getting close to him meant becoming another person he'd inevitably fail to protect, why let anyone close at all? You're not failing them, Elena said firmly. You gave Lucia 5 years. You're giving Isabella comfort at the end, and you're here now, with me, choosing to try again, even though it terrifies you. That's not failure, Marco. That's courage. Doesn't feel courageous. Feels like I'm setting us both up for more pain. Maybe, Elena allowed. Or maybe we're setting ourselves up for something beautiful, something worth the risk. They lay in silence for a while, the darkness pressing close around them. Elena's hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach, still flat, but hiding the tiny life growing inside. Their child. A person who would someday ask questions about who their parents were and what kind of world they'd brought them into. What would they say? How would they explain the complexity of what they were trying to build here? A life together, despite impossible odds. A family forged from broken pieces and second chances. I want to do the public announcement, Elena said finally. Tomorrow. Today. Whatever. I want to stand beside you and tell the whole city that we're together, that we're having a baby, that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with both of us. Marco shifted to look at her. You're sure? Once we do this, there's no taking it back. You become a permanent part of my world. Every enemy I have becomes your enemy. They already are, Elena pointed out. That text message made that clear. At least this way we face them on our terms. It'll be a circus, media everywhere, questions about where you've been, why we separated, how we reconciled. They'll dig into everything. Let them dig, Elena's voice was steady. We tell the truth, or as much of it as we want to share. We separated because of a misunderstanding. We reconciled because we love each other. We're having a baby and building a future together. Simple. Nothing about us is simple. Then maybe it's time we made it simple. Elena sat up, looking down at him. I'm tired of running, Marco. Tired of being afraid, tired of letting other people's expectations or threats dictate how we live our lives. I want to be with you. I want to raise our child together. I want to build something real, even if it's messy and complicated and sometimes terrifying. Can we do that? Can we just choose each other and deal with the consequences? Marco reached up, cupping her face in his hands. I've been choosing you since the day we met, Elena. Even when I thought letting you go was the right thing to do, I never stopped choosing you. If you're ready to face this world together, then yes, we announce it. We make it real. We dare anyone to try to tear us apart. Tomorrow then, Elena said. We call a press conference or whatever you do. We tell our story our way. Tomorrow, Marco agreed. But first, we sleep. Or at least try to. He pulled her back down beside him, and this time when Elena closed her eyes, she felt the tension leaving his body. Not all of it. Marco would probably never fully relax, but enough. Enough to let himself rest with her in his arms and their future, terrifying and hopeful in equal measure, waiting for them on the other side of dawn. Elena was drifting off when his voice came again, soft in the darkness. I love you. I should have said it more when we were together before. Should have made sure you knew it every single day. But I'm saying it now, and I'll keep saying it for as long as you'll let me. I love you, Elena. You and our child. You're everything that matters. I love you too, Elena whispered back. Even when I was trying not to, even when I was running, I never stopped loving you. It should have been enough to end on. A perfect moment of connection before sleep, but Elena's mind kept circling back to that text message, to the implications of someone watching, waiting, planning something neither of them could predict. Marco? She said into the darkness. When we find out who sent that message, what will you do? She felt him go still beside her. What do you want me to do? It was the right question. The only question. Because this was the heart of everything. Whether Marco would let her in, let her help shape the choices that would define their future, or whether he'd make decisions alone and ask her to live with the consequences. "I want you to talk to them first," Elena said. "Before anything else, I want you to give them a chance to back off, to explain, to walk away. Because maybe this is just a warning. Maybe whoever's behind it is testing us, seeing how we'll react. And if we react with violence, we prove we're exactly what they think we are. And if talking doesn't work," Elena took a breath, "then we protect our family, whatever that takes. But we try peace first. We try being better than the violence. Because I don't want our child growing up thinking that force is the only answer. I want them to know their parents tried every other option first." Marco was quiet for so long Elena thought he might have fallen asleep. Then his arms tightened around her. "Okay," he said. "We try it your way. We talk first. We give them a chance to back down. And if they don't, if they push, then I do what needs to be done. But we try peace first." It was a compromise, an imperfect one. But it was also proof that Marco was willing to meet her halfway, to consider options beyond his default response of overwhelming force. That had to count for something. Elena let herself relax fully for the first time in hours. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The press conference, the questions, the inevitable fallout from going public. But tonight, in the darkness of the bedroom they'd once shared, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could do this. Maybe love really was enough, as long as it came with honesty and courage, and a willingness to keep choosing each other even when the easy path was to walk away. She was almost asleep when she heard it, a sound so soft she almost missed it. Marco's breathing had changed, no longer the controlled rhythm of wakefulness, but the deeper, slower pattern of sleep. He'd finally let his guard down, finally allowed himself to rest. Elena smiled into the darkness and let herself follow him into dreams. Morning came too quickly, gray light filtering through the curtains and bringing with it the weight of decisions made in the dark. Elena woke to find Marco already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "Third and fourth thoughts," he admitted. "But I'm not backing out. If you're ready to do this, so am I." They dressed carefully, Elena borrowing clothes from the closet that still held her things. She chose a simple navy dress, elegant but not flashy, appropriate for a woman announcing her reconciliation with her husband and her pregnancy. Downstairs, Thomas was waiting with updates. The security sweep had found 3 more surveillance points around the property, cameras placed in the last 72 hours. Professional work, expensive equipment. Whoever was watching them had resources. "And the text message?" Marco asked, his voice all business now. "Traced to a burner phone already destroyed. But we pulled security footage from the hospital. Got a partial plate on the sedan, running it now." "Good. Let me know the second you have something." Marco turned to Elena. "The press conference is set for noon. My PR team will brief you on what to expect. You don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with." "I'll be fine," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Marco's team descended on the house. Publicists, lawyers, security personnel, all working to coordinate what would be the biggest story to hit the city in months. Marco Valenti, known for his privacy and his power, was about to let the world in. At 11:30, Elena stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her dress for the 10th time. She looked pale, nervous, nothing like the confident woman she was trying to project. A knock on the door. Marco entered, impossibly handsome in a dark suit. He crossed to her, taking her hands. "We don't have to do this," he said quietly. "If you're having doubts, we can call it off. Find another way." Elena looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but I'm not backing out. We do this together." Marco lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Together," he agreed. At noon exactly, they walked into the main drawing room where cameras and reporters waited. The room went silent as they appeared, every eye tracking their entrance. Elena felt the weight of all that attention, all that speculation, all that judgment. But Marco's hand was steady on her back, grounding her. They took their positions at the podium. Marco spoke first, his voice carrying quiet authority as he explained their separation, their reconciliation, their decision to try again. He was careful with his words, revealing enough to satisfy curiosity without exposing anything too personal. Then it was Elena's turn. She stepped forward, met the cameras head on, and spoke the truth that would change everything. We're having a baby, and we're building a future together. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to discuss it with us directly. The room erupted. Questions came from every direction, voices overlapping in a cacophony that threatened to overwhelm the carefully controlled atmosphere Marco's team had tried to establish. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing every micro-expression, every telling gesture between them. Mr. Valenti, does this reconciliation signal a shift in your business operations? Mrs. Valenti, where have you been for the past 3 months? Is the pregnancy the reason for the reconciliation? What message does this send to your rivals? Marco raised his hand and the room quieted almost instantly. It was a demonstration of power so subtle most people probably didn't even notice it, but Elena felt it like a physical force. This was his world, and even the media operated by his rules. The pregnancy is a blessing, not a reason, Marco said, his voice cutting through the lingering murmurs. Elena and I separated due to a misunderstanding. We've resolved it. That's all anyone needs to know about our private life. But Mr. Valenti, a reporter in the front row started. That's all, Marco repeated, steel beneath the polite words. We're here to announce our reconciliation and our expectation of a child. The rest is between my wife and me. Now, if there are no other relevant questions, we have an appointment to keep. It was a dismissal, clear and absolute. The reporters knew it, but several still tried to shout questions as Marco guided Elena toward the side exit. Thomas and 2 other security personnel materialized to create a barrier between them and the cameras. They were in the hallway, the door closing on the chaos behind them, when Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. That was, she started, a disaster, Marco finished grimly. They're going to tear that statement apart, analyze every word, speculate about everything we didn't say. So we let them, Elena said, surprising herself with how steady her voice was. Let them speculate. We know the truth. That's what matters. Marco looked at her, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. You're handling this better than I expected. Don't be fooled, Elena admitted. I'm about 3 seconds from a panic attack, but I figure if I'm going to fall apart, I'd rather do it somewhere without cameras. A ghost of a smile touched Marco's lips. Come on, let's get out of here before they figure out how to get past Thomas. They took a private elevator to Marco's office on the 3rd floor, a space Elena had rarely visited during their marriage. It was exactly what she'd expected. Massive desk, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, shelves lined with books on strategy and history and philosophy. But what caught her attention was the small framed photograph on his desk, half hidden behind a stack of files. It was her, from their wedding day, laughing at something just outside the frame. She'd forgotten that moment, but apparently Marco hadn't. He'd kept it where he could see it every day, a reminder of what he'd lost. I meant to put that away before you came up, Marco said quietly, following her gaze. Didn't want you to think I'd been pining? Elena suggested, her throat tight. Because that's exactly what it looks like. Would it be so terrible if I was? Elena turned to face him fully. No, it would be human, which is sometimes hard to remember when you're being Marco Valenti, master of the universe. I'm not... He stopped, reconsidered. Maybe I am. Maybe I've spent so long playing that role that I forgot how to be anything else. How to be just Marco. I fell in love with just Marco, Elena said. The man who brought me coffee in bed and remembered that I like old movies and stayed up all night when I had food poisoning, holding my hair back and not complaining once. That's who I want, not the mask you show everyone else. Marco crossed to her, his hands coming up to frame her face. What if the mask is part of who I am now? What if I can't separate the two anymore? Then I love both, Elena said simply. The powerful man who runs an empire and the gentle man who sits with dying women to keep his promises. You're not one or the other, Marco. You're both. And I'm choosing all of you. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, 3 months of separation pouring into the contact. Elena kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his jacket, pulling him closer. This was real. This was them, without cameras or audiences or careful PR statements. Just 2 people who'd found their way back to each other against impossible odds. Marco's phone buzzed insistently. He ignored it. It buzzed again. You should answer that, Elena murmured against his lips. It can wait. Marco. He pulled back with obvious reluctance, checking the screen. Whatever he saw there made his expression shudder. It's Thomas. They found something. The moment shattered. Marco answered the call, his voice all business. What do you have? Elena watched his face as he listened, watched the way his jaw tightened and his free hand clenched. Nothing good, then. I'll be right down, Marco said finally. He ended the call and looked at Elena. The sedan from the hospital. They tracked it to a rental company. The person who rented it used a false ID, but security footage caught their face. Thomas thinks he recognizes them. From where? From a rival organization, the Castellanos. The name meant nothing to Elena, but clearly it meant something to Marco. His entire posture had changed, shifting from the man who'd been kissing her moments ago to something harder, more dangerous. Talk to me, Elena said. Who are the Castellanos? Marco ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the careful style. Salvatore Castellano runs most of the waterfront operations. Shipping, imports, some less legal ventures I've been trying to shut down. We've had an understanding for years. He stays off my territory, I stay off his. But recently he's been pushing boundaries, testing to see if I'm still strong enough to push back. And you think this is him, testing you through me? It's his style. Salvatore doesn't do direct confrontation. He probes for weaknesses, exploits them, waits for you to destroy yourself, reacting to his provocations. Marco's voice was cold now, clinical. If he knows about you, about the baby, he'll see it as exactly what it is. A vulnerability. Something he can use. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. So what do we do? I handle it. No. Elena stepped in front of him, blocking his path to the door. We handle it, together. Remember? That's what we agreed. Elena, this isn't a situation where you shut me out and make decisions alone? Elena's voice hardened. Because that's exactly what got us here in the first place. You keeping secrets, making choices for me without including me in the process. I thought we were past that. Marco's expression warred between frustration and something that might have been respect. This is different. This is my world, my rules. I know how to handle Castellano. Then teach me, Elena challenged. Explain it to me so I understand. Because I'm part of this now, whether you like it or not. That press conference made sure of it. So either you include me in the solution, or you go down there and prove that nothing's really changed between us. It was a gamble, pushing him like this. But Elena was tired of being protected from the truth, tired of being kept safe in ignorance while Marco carried all the weight alone. If they were going to build a real partnership, it had to start with trust. Complete trust, even when things got dangerous. Marco stared at her for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. Fine, come with me. But you listen to what Thomas found, and then we discuss options. Together. And if I say something's too dangerous, you trust that I know what I'm talking about. As long as you trust that I might see solutions you're missing, Elena countered. Deal. They found Thomas in the security office, a room Elena had never seen before. Banks of monitors showed feeds from cameras all around the property, and she realized with a jolt several locations around the city. The level of surveillance was staggering. Mrs. Valenti, Thomas said, clearly surprised to see her. He looked to Marco for confirmation. She's involved now, Marco said simply. Show us what you found. Thomas pulled up footage on the main screen. A man, maybe 40, with dark hair and a forgettable face. The kind of person who could blend into any crowd. His name is Vincent Costa, Thomas explained. Low-level operative for the Castellanos. Usually handles surveillance and intelligence gathering. Not muscle, not a decision maker, which means he was following orders. Salvatore's orders, Marco said flatly. Most likely. We're still trying to confirm the chain of command, but Costa's been on Castellano's payroll for 6 years. This isn't freelance work. Elena studied the screen, this unremarkable man who'd been watching her, photographing her most vulnerable moments. Have you found him yet? Not yet. He went underground after sending that text. Dumped the phone, abandoned the rental car. But he'll surface. They always do. And when he does? Elena asked. Thomas looked uncomfortable. That's Mr. Valenti's call. Elena turned to Marco. So call it. What happens when you find him? Marco's expression was unreadable. We bring him in, ask him some questions, find out exactly what Castellano knows and what he's planning. And after you've asked your questions? The silence that followed was answer enough. Elena felt her stomach turn, but she forced herself to hold Marco's gaze. This was the reality of his world. Questions that got answered through fear and pain, information extracted at whatever cost necessary. And afterwards, people like Vincent Costa didn't walk away to tell the story. There has to be another option, Elena said. There isn't, Marco replied, but there was something in his voice, a hint of doubt, maybe, or hope that she'd prove him wrong. What if we flip him, Elena suggested. What if instead of making him disappear, we turn him into an asset? Someone who can feed false information back to Castellano, make him think his surveillance is working when really we're controlling what he sees? Thomas blinked. That's actually not a bad idea. It's risky, Marco countered. How do we know he wouldn't just run back to Castellano and report everything? Because we make it worth his while not to, Elena said, her mind racing now. Everyone has a price, right? Something they want more than loyalty to an employer who sees them as disposable? We find Costa's price and we offer it to him. Give him a reason to choose us over Castellano. And if his price is something we can't give, then we find another way, Elena said firmly. But we try this first. We try to build an asset instead of making an enemy. Because from what you've told me, Castellano is looking for proof that you're weakening. What sends a stronger message? Killing one of his low-level guys or turning that guy into your spy? Which one shows real power? She could see Marco processing this, his tactical mind running through scenarios. Thomas was watching his boss, clearly interested to see which way this would go. It could work, Thomas said slowly. Costa's got a sister, single mother, 3 kids, struggling to make rent every month. He sends her money regularly. If we offered to set her up properly, legitimate job, safe housing, college funds for the kids, that might be enough to flip him. Or he could take the money and sell us out anyway, Marco pointed out. So we keep leverage, Elena said. We help his sister, yes. But we also make it very clear what happens if he betrays us. Not violence, she added quickly, seeing Marco's expression. But consequences, legal troubles, financial ruin, whatever it takes to make betrayal more costly than cooperation. Marco was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. She could almost see the internal battle between the instincts that had kept him alive and powerful in this world, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. We try it your way, he said finally. We find Costa, we make the offer, we see if he bites. But Elena, if this goes wrong, if he runs to Castellano or puts you in more danger, we do it my way. No arguments. No arguments, Elena agreed. Thomas was already on his phone, mobilizing teams to track Costa's known associates and possible hiding spots. Marco pulled Elena aside, his voice low. You realize what you just did? Convinced you to try negotiation before violence? Changed the entire playbook, Marco corrected. In my world, you don't flip enemy operatives. You eliminate them, send a message, but you saw another option, a better option, and you convinced me to try it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Marco's smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. I'm still deciding. Ask me after we see if it works. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in patience and strategy. Marco's people tracked Costa's movements, building a picture of his habits and vulnerabilities. His sister Maria worked 2 jobs and lived in a neighborhood where gunshots were background noise. Her 3 kids, ages 4, 7, and 9, attended an overcrowded public school with metal detectors and security guards. It was exactly the kind of life that made people do desperate things, like spy on dangerous men for employers who'd dispose of them the moment they became inconvenient. They found Costa at 4 p.m., holed up in a motel on the edge of the city. Thomas went in first, alone and unarmed, carrying a tablet and a simple message. Marco Valenti wanted to talk, and Costa had exactly 1 chance to make the smart choice. Elena watched the feed from the surveillance van Marco had insisted she stay in. It was a compromise. She could be involved, but from a safe distance. On screen, she saw Costa's face when Thomas delivered the message. Fear, confusion, and then something else. Calculation. The wheels turning as he weighed his options. He's gonna run, Marco said, his voice tight. But Costa didn't run. He looked at the tablet Thomas had set on the motel table, looked at the photos of his sister and her children going about their daily lives, not threatened, just documented, and something in his posture changed. What's the offer? Costa's voice came through the feed, tinny but clear. Thomas explained. Elena had worked out the details with Marco's financial team, a legitimate front company that would employ Maria at 3 times her current salary, fully paid benefits, a safe apartment in a good school district, college funds for each kid, and for Vincent, a chance to keep doing what he was good at, surveillance and intelligence, but for an organization that would value him instead of treating him as disposable. All he had to do was tell them exactly what Castellano knew, what he was planning, and then feed false information back through carefully managed channels. And if I say no, Costa asked. Then you walk out of here, Thomas said calmly. No threats, no violence. You go back to Castellano. Tell him whatever you want. But the help we're offering your sister? Gone. And you better hope Salvatore values you enough to protect you when Mr. Valenti decides you're a liability. It wasn't quite the nonviolent approach Elena had advocated for, but it was closer than anything Marco would have done before. And she could see it working. Costa's resistance crumbling under the weight of Thomas's calm certainty and the evidence that the Valentis had done their homework. I need to think about it, Costa said. You have 30 seconds, Thomas replied. After that, the offer expires and we all go our separate ways. Elena held her breath, counting down the seconds in her head. Beside her, Marco was motionless, barely breathing. Everything hung in this moment, proof that her way could work, or confirmation that violence was the only language this world understood. At 28 seconds, Costa spoke. I'm in, but I want to talk to Valenti directly. Make sure this is real and not just some elaborate setup to make me disappear. Marco was already moving, ignoring Elena's protest. He strode into the motel room with the confidence of a man who owned the ground he walked on, and suddenly the dingy space felt smaller, charged with the force of his presence. Costa stood, but he didn't extend his hand. Smart man. Tell me what Castellano knows, Marco said without preamble. Costa glanced at Thomas, then back to Marco. Everything. He knows about your wife, the pregnancy, the reconciliation. He's been tracking both of you for months since before you separated. He knew about Isabella Moretti, knew you were visiting her at the hospital. He was the one who made sure your wife saw you with her that day at the restaurant. Elena felt the world tilt. What? The reservation, Costa said, looking uncomfortable now. It wasn't coincidence. Castellano set it up, made sure Mrs. Valenti would be shopping in that area at that exact time, made sure she'd see Mr. Valenti with Isabella. He wanted to drive a wedge between you, make you vulnerable. It worked, Marco said flatly. For a while. But then you reconciled. Castellano didn't expect that. He thought once you were apart, he could... Costa stopped. Could what? Marco's voice was deadly quiet. Could eliminate you while you were distracted. Take over your territory. He's been building alliances, making promises. Once you were weak enough, vulnerable enough, he was going to move. Elena's hands were shaking, all of it. The photograph she'd seen, the pain of the last 3 months, the separation that had nearly destroyed them both. It had all been engineered. Deliberate manipulation designed to break them apart and leave Marco exposed. Why are you telling us this? She asked, her voice barely steady. Costa looked at her directly for the first time. Because I'm tired of working for a man who sees people as chess pieces, who destroy a marriage just to gain a business advantage. My sister, she's all I have that matters. And if working for Valenti means she and her kids get a real chance at life, then yeah, I'm telling you everything. Prove it, Marco said. Tell us something we can verify. Something that shows you're not just feeding us information to buy time. Costa took a breath. Castellano has a shipment coming in Thursday night. Pier 47. It's not on any manifest, not going through customs. High-value cargo he's been planning for months. Weapons, mostly, but also some pharmaceutical supplies he'll sell on the black market. He's been very careful to keep it quiet because he knows if you found out, you'd shut it down. Pier 47 is Castellano territory, Thomas pointed out. We don't have jurisdiction there. You do as of 2 weeks ago, Costa said. The Port Authority transferred oversight to a company Castellano thought he owned. But the paperwork went through a subsidiary that's actually controlled by Valenti Enterprises. Castellano doesn't know yet. He thinks he's operating in safe territory. Marco and Thomas exchanged a look. How do you know about the subsidiary? Marco asked. Because I'm the one who does Castellano's intelligence work, Costa said. And I've been sloppy lately, missing things. Because honestly, I've been looking for a way out for months. This just happens to be better than any exit plan I'd come up with on my own. It was proof, real, verifiable proof, that Costa was giving them actionable intelligence. If the shipment was real, if it existed where and when he said it did, then he was legitimately flipping. And if Marco could intercept that cargo, it would be a major blow to Castellano's operations. Thursday night, Marco said, you're going to give us every detail you have about that shipment, routes, personnel, timing, contingency plans, everything. And then you're going to contact Castellano and tell him that you've confirmed Valenti doesn't know about it, that his surveillance on us is working perfectly. And my sister? We'll be in her new apartment by tomorrow evening, Marco said. Thomas will handle the arrangements personally. Your nieces and nephews will be enrolled in their new school by Monday. But Costa, if you're lying to us, if this is some elaborate double cross, the help we're giving your family disappears. And then we have a very different conversation about consequences. Are we clear? Crystal, Costa said. They spent the next 2 hours going through every detail of Castellano's operation. Costa proved to be a valuable asset, his knowledge comprehensive and his willingness to share complete. By the time they finished, Marco had enough information to not just intercept the Thursday shipment, but to dismantle a significant portion of Castellano's infrastructure. And Elena had proof that her way could work. That building alliances was sometimes more powerful than eliminating enemies. That the moral high ground wasn't just an ideal, but a tactical advantage. On the drive back to the mansion, Marco took her hand. You were right, he said quietly, about Costa. About trying a different approach. I wouldn't have seen it, would have made him disappear and never thought twice about it. You would have eventually, Elena said. You're not the man you think you are, Marco. The monster you're so afraid of becoming, that's not who you are. It's who you think you have to be to survive. Maybe? Or maybe I'm becoming someone better because you're showing me how. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. We're doing this together. That's the whole point. You show me how to survive in your world. I show you how to stay human in it. Fair trade. Marco pressed a kiss to her hair. More than fair. They arrived home to find the house lit up like a beacon. Security doubled after the press conference and the new intelligence about Castellano. Thomas had already begun implementing the arrangements for Costa's sister, working with Marco's legitimate business contacts to create a paper trail that would stand up to scrutiny. Elena was exhausted, the emotional toll of the day finally catching up with her. But there was one more thing she needed to do. I want to meet her, she said as they entered the house. Costa's sister, Maria. I want to meet her and her kids, make sure this is real for them, and not just another manipulation. Elena, please, Marco, I need to see that we're actually helping people, not just moving chess pieces around like Castellano does. I need to know that what we're building is different. Marco studied her face, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow. We'll visit her together. But tonight, you rest. You've had enough stress for one day. He was right, but Elena found herself reluctant to let go of the day's momentum. So much had happened. The press conference, the confrontation with their surveillance problem, the successful flip of an enemy asset. They'd proven that her approach could work. That building instead of destroying was possible even in Marco's world. It felt like victory. Fragile, conditional victory, but victory nonetheless. In their bedroom, Elena changed into comfortable clothes while Marco made calls, coordinating the Thursday night operation with his team. She could hear the shift in his voice when he talked business, harder, more commanding, the version of himself he showed the world. But when he ended the last call and turned to her, his expression softened. Come here, he said, and Elena went, letting him pull her into his arms. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together, finding their center after the chaos of the day. Marco's hand drifted to her stomach, still flat but holding their future. I'm terrified, he admitted quietly, of failing you again, of not being good enough for this, for being a father, for being the partner you deserve, of this world destroying everything good we're trying to build. Then we'll be terrified together, Elena said, and we'll figure it out as we go. That's all anyone can do. Other people don't have enemies like Salvatore Castellano. Other people don't have your resources, your intelligence, your capacity to adapt and overcome. We'll handle Castellano, and whoever comes after him, and whoever comes after that. One threat at a time, one day at a time. Together. Marco's arms tightened around her. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Elena agreed, and felt him huff a laugh against her hair. But you're stuck with me anyway, for better or worse, remember? Those vows still count, even though we almost divorced? They count because we chose each other again, because we could have walked away and we didn't. That makes them stronger, not weaker. They climbed into bed, exhaustion finally winning out over the adrenaline that had sustained them through the day. But just as Elena was drifting off, Marco spoke again. Thursday night, when we intercept that shipment, I want you somewhere safe. Somewhere Castellano can't reach you if this goes wrong. I'll be here, Elena said, with enough security to invade a small country, if Thomas has his way. But Marco, promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come back. I promise, he said. I have too much to lose now to take stupid risks. It should have been reassuring. Instead, Elena felt a chill of premonition, a sense that despite all their careful planning and new strategies, something was going to go terribly wrong. She pushed the feeling aside, telling herself it was just pregnancy hormones and exhaustion. They had a plan. They had intelligence. They had each other. It would be enough. It had to be enough. Thursday came too quickly, bringing with it a tension that settled over the Valenti mansion like morning fog. Elena woke to find Marco already dressed, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. The conversation was clipped, tactical, his body language radiating the coiled readiness of a man preparing for war. She watched him for a moment before speaking, memorizing the line of his shoulders, the way early light caught in his dark hair. If her premonition meant anything, if something did go wrong tonight, she wanted this image burned into her memory. How long have you been up? She asked when he ended the call. Marco turned, and the hardness in his expression softened slightly when he saw her. Couple hours. Couldn't sleep. Too much to coordinate. Come back to bed for a few minutes. You'll need your strength for tonight. I'll rest after it's done, Marco said. But he crossed to the bed anyway, sitting on the edge. Elena reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. Talk me through it, she said. The plan. What happens tonight? Marco hesitated, clearly weighing how much to tell her. But they'd made a promise. No more secrets, total honesty. So finally he began. We have teams positioned at 3 points around Pier 47. When Castellano's shipment arrives, we intercept it before it can be unloaded. Coast Guard's involved, through some contacts I have, so it'll look like a routine inspection that happens to find contraband. Castellano loses the cargo, loses the money he's already paid for it, and loses face with the suppliers who trusted him to execute a clean operation. And Costa? Feeding Castellano false intel right now, telling him we're focused on a completely different area of the city, chasing a lead about a rival gang moving in on territory near the East Docks. By the time Castellano realizes it's a diversion, his shipment will be in federal custody. It sounded clean, almost too clean. Elena studied Marco's face, looking for what he wasn't saying. What could go wrong? She asked. 100 things, Marco admitted. Castellano could have better intelligence than we think, could have his own people inside the Coast Guard, could have changed the location or timing, and Costa doesn't know about it, could decide that losing one shipment is worth taking a shot at me while I'm exposed. Then don't go, Elena said immediately. Send Thomas. Send your whole team. You don't need to be there personally. Yes, I do. Marco's voice was firm. If I'm asking my people to walk into potential danger, I stand with them. That's non-negotiable. Even if it means risking everything we're building? Especially then, Marco said. Because if I hide behind my people, let them take risks I'm not willing to take myself, what does that say about the man I'm trying to become? What kind of father does that make me? Elena wanted to argue, wanted to find some logic that would keep him safe at home, where she could see him, know he was protected. But she understood what he was saying. This was about more than one shipment or one rival. This was about Marco proving to himself that he could be both powerful and principled, that he could protect his family without sacrificing his integrity. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. If it goes wrong, if Castellano has a trap waiting, you run. You don't try to be a hero. You don't sacrifice yourself for pride or principle or anything else. You come home to me and our baby. Promise me." Marco leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "I promise. No heroics. I'll be smart, careful, and I'll come home." "Good." Elena kissed him, trying to pour every ounce of love and fear and hope into the contact. "Because I'm not doing this alone. I need you, Marco Valenti. Our child needs you, so you better keep that promise." "I will," he murmured against her lips. "I will." The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Marco spent most of it in his office, coordinating with his team, running through scenarios and contingencies. Elena tried to distract herself with the arrangements for Maria Costa and her children, but even that couldn't fully quiet the anxiety churning in her gut. At noon, Maria arrived at the house with her 3 kids in tow. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes that had seen too much hardship too soon. The children clustered around their mother, wide-eyed at the opulence of the mansion. "Mrs. Valenti?" Maria said, her voice uncertain. "Vincent said you wanted to meet us. I don't understand what's happening. He said something about a new job, a new apartment, but it seems too good to be—" "It's real," Elena assured her, crouching down to be at eye level with the kids. "Hi there. I'm Elena. What are your names?" The oldest, a girl with her mother's dark eyes, spoke first. "I'm Sophia. This is Miguel, and that's little Carlos. It's very nice to meet you all," Elena said warmly. "How would you like to see the garden? We have a playground out back that no one's used in ages." The children looked to their mother for permission. Maria nodded, still looking bewildered, and the kids took off with the kind of energy only children possessed. Once they were alone, Maria's composure cracked. "What's the catch? Vincent said Mr. Valenti wants to help us, but men like that don't help people for nothing. What does he want from my brother?" Elena guided her to a sitting area, appreciating the woman's directness. "Your brother has information that's valuable to us. In exchange for that information and his continued cooperation, we're offering him legitimate work and offering you and your children a better life. No strings attached beyond Vincent keeping his word. And if he doesn't, if he screws this up somehow, then the help stops," Elena said honestly. "But Vincent won't lose anything he had before. We're not in the business of punishing families for one person's mistakes." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what it's like? Working 2 jobs and still not being able to afford winter coats for your kids? Lying awake at night wondering if you'll make rent, if they'll have food, if the school will call about another fight Miguel got into because the other kids make fun of his shoes?" Elena took her hand. "I can't pretend to understand exactly what you've been through, but I know what it's like to feel powerless, to feel like the world is grinding you down and there's nothing you can do to stop it. This is real, Maria. The apartment, the job, the schools, all of it. You can have a different life if you want it." "Why?" Maria whispered. "Why would you do this for strangers?" "Because someone once told me that the measure of a person isn't the violence they're capable of, but what they choose to do with that capability," Elena said, thinking of Isabella's words to Marco. "We're choosing to build something better, to help where we can. Your family needed help, and we can provide it. It's that simple." It wasn't simple, of course. Nothing in Marco's world was ever simple. But seeing Maria's face as Thomas showed her photos of the new apartment, watching the children play in the garden with the kind of carefree joy that came from not worrying where the next meal would come from, that felt like proof that they were on the right path. By the time the Costa family left, Maria was openly crying, hugging Elena with fierce gratitude. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you for giving us a chance." Elena watched them drive away in the car Thomas had arranged, a reliable sedan that was years newer than anything Maria could have afforded on her own. This was what power could do when wielded with purpose. Not destruction, but creation. Not breaking people, but building them up. If only she could shake the feeling that all of it was about to come crashing down. The sun set at 6:47 p.m. Marco left at 7:15, dressed in dark tactical gear that made him look like exactly what he was, a man going into potential combat. Elena walked him to the car, ignoring Thomas's subtle suggestion that she wait inside. "Be smart," she said, adjusting his vest even though it was already perfectly secure. "Be careful. Come home." "I will," Marco promised. He kissed her, long and deep, then rested his hand on her stomach. "Both of you stay safe. Thomas has orders to lock this place down the moment I'm gone. No one gets in without clearance." "We'll be fine. It's you I'm worried about." "Don't be. This is what I do, Elena. I've been running operations like this since before we met. I'll be home before midnight and we can celebrate Castellano's loss over that chamomile tea you like." Elena managed a smile. "I'll hold you to that." She watched the car pull away, taking with it the man who'd become her entire world. The gates closed behind him with a finality that made her stomach clench. Thomas appeared at her elbow, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes kind. "He'll be fine, Mrs. Valenti. I've seen him handle worse situations than this." "I know," Elena said. "Doesn't make it easier to watch him drive into danger." "No, ma'am, it doesn't. But he's good at what he does, best I've ever seen, and he's got more reason than ever to come home safe." They went inside. Thomas activated security protocols that turned the mansion into a fortress. Additional guards posted at every entrance, cameras monitoring every angle, motion sensors that would trigger if anything larger than a cat moved on the grounds. It should have felt safe. Instead, it felt like a gilded cage. Elena tried to distract herself with a book, then television, then restless pacing through the empty house. Every room held memories now. The kitchen where Marco had taught her to make his mother's pasta recipe, the library where they'd spent quiet evenings reading together, the terrace where he'd proposed with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. 8 months of marriage before it fell apart. 3 months of painful separation. And now, barely a week back together, already facing threats that could tear them apart permanently. At 9:30, her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. "Package secured, headed home soon." Relief flooded through her so intensely she had to sit down. It had worked. The operation was successful. Marco would be home safe, and Castellano would be reeling from the loss. Elena was typing a response when the house went dark. Not just the lights. Everything. The hum of electronics, the subtle whir of the security system, even the emergency backup lights that should have kicked on immediately. Complete, absolute darkness. "Thomas?" Elena called out, proud that her voice didn't shake. No response. She fumbled for her phone, using its dim light to navigate toward the hallway. The silence was wrong. A house this size, with this many security personnel, should never be completely silent. "Thomas!" she called again, louder now. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind, cutting off her scream. Elena fought, driving her elbow back into her attacker's ribs, but he was ready for it, absorbing the blow without loosening his grip. "Quiet, Mrs. Valenti," a voice whispered in her ear. Not threatening, almost apologetic. "Mr. Castellano wants to talk to you. He promises you won't be harmed if you cooperate." Elena bit down on the hand covering her mouth. The man cursed, his grip loosening just enough for her to wrench free and run. She made it 3 steps before another figure blocked her path. This one didn't bother with gentle restraint. He simply grabbed her, lifting her off her feet as she kicked and fought. "Sedate her," the first voice said. "Castellano wants her calm." "No." Elena started, but she felt the sharp sting of a needle in her arm, and then the world started to blur. Her last coherent thought before darkness claimed her was of Marco, coming home to an empty house and a broken promise that she'd stay safe. She woke to filtered daylight and the smell of expensive cigars. Elena's head throbbed, her mouth dry as cotton. It took several seconds for her surroundings to come into focus. She was in an office, elegant and masculine, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Not the Valenti mansion, somewhere else entirely. "Ah, Mrs. Valenti, welcome back." The voice came from a man seated behind a massive mahogany desk. He was perhaps 60, well-dressed in an expensive suit, with silver hair, and the kind of face that could be called distinguished if you didn't know what he'd done to earn his wealth and power. "Salvatore Castellano." Elena tried to stand, but her hands were zip-tied to the arms of her chair. Not tight enough to cut off circulation, but secure enough that she couldn't move. "Don't bother struggling," Castellano said mildly. "You're not in any danger. I simply needed to ensure your husband's full attention, and nothing gets Marco Valenti's attention quite like threatening something he loves." "He's going to kill you for this," Elena said, her voice hoarse from whatever they'd used to sedate her. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he'll be smart and negotiate. That's what I'm hoping for, actually. Your husband and I have been at odds for far too long. Time we came to an understanding." "By kidnapping his pregnant wife?" Elena's hands instinctively moved to her stomach, relief flooding through her when she felt no pain, no signs that the baby had been harmed. "That's your idea of opening negotiations?" "It's my idea of leveling the playing field," Castellano corrected. "Your husband cost me a significant amount of money last night. A shipment I'd planned for months, gone. Cargo worth millions, seized. Relationships with suppliers damaged, perhaps beyond repair. I could respond with violence, start a war that would cost both of us dearly. Or I could do this, take something he values and negotiate from a position of strength." "You think holding me hostage makes you strong?" Elena laughed, bitter and sharp. "It makes you desperate. It proves you can't beat Marco through legitimate means, so you resort to coward's tactics." Castellano's expression hardened. "Careful, Mrs. Valenti. I've been very clear that you're not to be harmed, but that courtesy extends only as long as you remain civil." Elena forced herself to breathe, to think past the fear and anger. She was alone with a man who'd orchestrated the destruction of her marriage, who'd kidnapped her to use as leverage, who clearly saw her as nothing more than a tool to manipulate Marco. Goading him would accomplish nothing, but maybe talking to him would. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "What terms are you offering for my release?" "Direct. I like that." Castellano leaned back in his chair. "It's simple, really. Your husband withdraws from waterfront operations entirely. cedes control of the docks to me. In exchange, I return you unharmed and we establish a permanent truce. No more interference in each other's business. Clean, professional boundaries." "And you think Marco will agree to that? Give up a major portion of his territory because you took me?" "I think he'll do whatever it takes to get you back safely," Castellano said. "He's already proven he values you above business interests. Why else reconcile publicly? Why else announce the pregnancy? He's showing the world his weakness, and I'm simply exploiting it." "Or he's showing the world that he's strong enough to protect what matters to him," Elena countered. "You think taking me makes you powerful? But all it does is guarantee that Marco will destroy you. Completely. Permanently. There won't be negotiation, Salvatore. There will be war, and you will lose." Bold words from a woman tied to a chair. True words from a woman who knows her husband. Elena met his eyes steadily. "You've made a critical mistake. You think I'm his weakness, but I'm actually his strength. His reason to be better, smarter, more strategic than he's ever been. And you just gave him the perfect motivation to show you exactly what he's capable of." Castellano studied her, something like respect flickering in his expression. "You really believe that?" "I know it. Just like I know that whatever happens here, whatever choices you make in the next few hours, will determine whether you survive what's coming. Because Marco Valenti is coming for me. And when he gets here, you better hope you've treated me well. Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," Elena said. "You can still fix this. You can let me go, call it a misunderstanding, and maybe he'll let you keep your life even if you lose your business. But if you hurt me, if you hurt our baby, there is nowhere on this earth you'll be able to hide from him." Castellano was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the desk. Finally, he stood, walking to the windows. "I didn't want this, you know," he said quietly. "I've known Marco since he was 25 years old, ambitious and ruthless, and absolutely certain he could remake this city in his image. We had an understanding back then, mutual respect, clear boundaries. But somewhere along the way, he started thinking he could change the rules, clean up the waterfront, shut down operations he deemed immoral. He forgot that this world doesn't reward morality." "Maybe that's the problem," Elena said. "Maybe this world needs someone willing to change the rules. Someone who remembers that power is supposed to protect people, not exploit them." "You sound like my daughter," Castellano said, and there was unexpected pain in his voice. "She used to say the same things, that there had to be a better way, that violence wasn't the only answer, She died believing that. Cancer, 7 years ago. And it didn't matter how much money I had, how many people feared me. I couldn't save her. And Marco got her back, Elena whispered, understanding dawning. He got her back, Castellano confirmed. When my own people couldn't find her, when the police did nothing, Marco Valenti tore apart that entire network until he found where they were keeping her, brought her home to me, refused payment, said no father should have to go through what I'd gone through. But she died anyway. Cancer, Castellano repeated. Just like Lucia, just like Isabella. The trauma, the doctor said. Sometimes the body can't process that kind of violation, and it manifests as disease years later. Gianna fought for 3 years before it took her, and His voice cracked. I've spent every day since trying to fill the hole she left, building empires, crushing rivals, accumulating power. None of it matters. None of it brings her back. Elena's heart broke for him despite everything. I'm sorry, truly. But Salvatore, taking me won't fill that hole either. It won't bring Gianna back or make the pain stop. It'll just add more death, more violence, more families destroyed. Is that really what she would have wanted? Castellano turned from the window, and Elena saw tears on his face. No. She'd be ashamed of what I've become, what I've done. But I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Then let Marco show you, Elena said urgently. He's trying to build something different, a way to have power without destroying everything good in the world. You could be part of that. You could help him instead of fighting him. And give up everything I've built? Transform it, Elena countered. The way Marco's transforming his operations, turn the waterfront into legitimate business. Use your connections and resources to build instead of destroy. Honor Gianna's memory by becoming the man she believed you could be. It was a gamble, a huge, desperate gamble built on nothing but intuition and the pain she'd seen in Castellano's eyes when he spoke about his daughter. But Elena was out of options, out of time, and betting everything on the possibility that grief and loss had made this man just as desperate for redemption as Marco. Castellano stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he moved to his desk, picking up a knife that made Elena's heart jump until she realized he was cutting through her zip ties. You're free to go, he said quietly. Tell your husband I want to talk, really talk. No weapons, no threats. Just two fathers who've lost too much and don't want to lose anything else. Elena stood on shaking legs, rubbing her wrists where the ties had left red marks. You'll release me? Just like that? Just like that? I have men who'll drive you back to your home. You have my word you won't be harmed. Your word didn't mean much when you had me kidnapped. No, Castellano agreed. But maybe it can start meaning something again. Maybe I can start being the man my daughter thought I was before this world corrupted me completely. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to think that her words had gotten through, that she'd somehow negotiated her freedom through nothing but conversation and appeal to his buried humanity. But years of watching people lie had taught her caution. Marco's going to want proof, she said, that this isn't another manipulation, that you're serious about peace. Castellano nodded slowly. What would convince him? Let him audit your waterfront operations. Show him you're willing to go legitimate. Work with him instead of against him. Build the kind of business Gianna could have been proud of. That's asking for a lot of trust. So is letting me walk out of here, Elena countered. But we both have to start somewhere if this is going to work. You take the first step by releasing me and offering real negotiation. Marco takes the next step by hearing you out instead of responding with violence. And maybe we build something better than what we had before. Castellano extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Elena shook it. Tell him I'll be waiting for his call, Castellano said. And Mrs. Valenti? I truly am sorry. For the kidnapping, for manipulating your marriage, for all of it. I've been so focused on winning that I forgot what I was fighting for in the first place. Then stop fighting, Elena said. Start building instead. That's what winners do. The drive back to the Valenti mansion took 40 minutes. Elena spent it composing a text to Marco that would keep him from immediately launching an assault on Castellano's position. She needed him to hear her out, to consider the possibility that peace might be achievable without more bloodshed. But when they pulled through the gates, she found Marco waiting on the front steps, and the expression on his face made her forget every carefully prepared word. He looked destroyed, absolutely destroyed, hair disheveled, eyes wild with grief and fury, his clothes rumpled like he'd been pacing for hours. The moment the car stopped, he was yanking open her door, pulling her out, his hands running over her face, her arms, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Did anyone—" His voice broke. "I'm fine," Elena assured him, pulling him into a fierce hug. "I'm okay. The baby's okay. We're both okay." Marco's arms crushed her against him, his whole body shaking. "I thought, when I came home and you were gone, when Thomas was unconscious and the security system was fried, I thought I'd lost you. Thought I'd broken my promise and you'd paid for it." "Thomas? Is he—" "Concussion. He'll recover. But Elena, they took you from a house that should have been impenetrable. They walked in like we had no security at all. If Castellano wanted to hurt you—" "He didn't," Elena interrupted. "Marco, listen to me. I need you to listen before you make any decisions. Castellano let me go, willingly. He wants to talk, really talk, about peace, about going legitimate, about ending this before anyone else gets hurt." Marco pulled back, his expression hardening. "He kidnapped you to get me to negotiate? That's his idea of peace?" "It was his idea of leverage," Elena admitted. "But I think, Marco, I think he's done. I think losing his daughter broke something in him, and he's been trying to fill that void with power and conquest. But it's not working. He's empty inside, just like you were when you let me walk away. And I think he's ready to try something different if you're willing to give him that chance. You want me to negotiate with the man who took you from our home? Who threatened our child? I want you to be the man who chooses building over destroying," Elena said fiercely. "The man who sees another broken father and offers him a path to redemption instead of revenge. I want you to be the man our child will be proud to call their father." Marco's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. He could be lying. This could all be a setup. "It could be," Elena agreed, "but we'll never know unless you take the risk. Unless you trust that maybe, just maybe, we can end this cycle of violence and build something better." She watched him struggle with it, watched years of ingrained responses fighting against the new path they were trying to forge together. And then, slowly, she felt the tension leave his body. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll talk to him. But Elena, if this is a trap, if he's planning something, then we handle it together," she finished. "But let's try peace first. Let's give him the chance to be better, the same chance you're giving yourself." Marco cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "How did I get so lucky? To find someone who sees possibilities where I only see threats?" "You didn't get lucky," Elena said. "You chose me, and I chose you. And we're going to keep choosing each other, and choosing hope, and choosing to believe that even in the darkest places, redemption is possible." He kissed her then, soft and reverent, a promise made without words. And as they stood there in the early morning light, Elena felt the last piece of her premonition click into place. Something had gone terribly wrong, but for the first time in this whole dangerous game, it had gone wrong in exactly the right way. The meeting was set for Neutral Ground, a restaurant that had been in business for 70 years, run by a family that owed allegiance to neither Valenti nor Castellano. Marco insisted on 3 days to prepare, to vet the location, to ensure that if this was a trap, they'd see it coming. Elena spent those 3 days resting, recovering from the ordeal, and trying to convince herself that her gamble with Castellano would pay off. Thomas recovered from his concussion with characteristic stoicism, though Elena caught the guilt in his eyes whenever he looked at her. He'd been on duty when she was taken, and no amount of assurance that he'd been ambushed by professionals would ease his sense of failure. "It wasn't your fault," Elena told him on the second day, finding him reviewing security footage for the 100th time. "They cut power, disabled backups, knew exactly where to hit. You couldn't have stopped it." "I should have anticipated it," Thomas said, his jaw tight. "Should have had contingencies for a coordinated assault. Mr. Valenti trusted me to keep you safe, and I failed." "You didn't fail. You survived. And you're here now, making sure it never happens again. That's what matters." Thomas finally met her eyes. "He was destroyed when he found you gone. I've worked for Mr. Valenti for 8 years, seen him handle every kind of crisis. But that night, He shook his head. I've never seen him like that. Completely undone. Elena felt her throat tighten. He thought he'd lost me. He thought he'd lost everything that mattered, and he was ready to burn the entire city to get you back. What you did, convincing Castellano to release you, talking Mr. Valenti into negotiating instead of retaliating, you saved a lot of lives, Mrs. Valenti, including his. The weight of that settled on Elena's shoulders. She'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that she hadn't fully considered what would have happened if she hadn't gotten through to Castellano. Marco would have declared war. People would have died. And even if Marco won, the cost would have been devastating. On the morning of the meeting, Elena woke to find Marco already dressed, staring out the window at the grounds below. She could see the tension in every line of his body, the way his hands clenched and unclenched as he wrestled with what was coming. "Second thoughts?" she asked softly. "100 thoughts," Marco admitted without turning. "Every instinct I have is screaming that this is a mistake, that I should eliminate Castellano while I have the chance, not sit across a table from him and pretend we can find common ground." Elena crossed to him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. "Your instincts kept you alive in a world where most people don't survive, but those same instincts almost cost you our marriage. Sometimes the safe choice and the right choice aren't the same thing." Marco turned in her arms, his hands coming up to frame her face. "What if you're wrong? What if Castellano is playing us, and I'm walking into a trap because I want to believe in redemption? Then we deal with it," Elena said. "But Marco, what if I'm right? What if this is the moment everything changes? Not just for us, but for everyone trapped in this cycle of violence? Isn't that possibility worth the risk?" "You are," Marco said quietly. "You and our baby, you're worth any risk. But I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong, if Castellano betrays this peace, I won't hesitate. I'll do what needs to be done to protect our family. And I need to know you can live with that." Elena held his gaze. "I can live with you protecting us. What I can't live with is you becoming the monster you're afraid you are because you never tried another way first. So yes, if Castellano betrays us, do what you must. But give him the chance to be better. That's all I'm asking." Marco kissed her forehead, then her lips, then rested his hand on her stomach where their child grew. "I love you, more than I've ever loved anything in my life. And I'm terrified that love is going to make me weak when I need to be strong." "Love doesn't make you weak," Elena said fiercely. "It makes you human. It gives you something worth fighting for beyond power and territory. That's not weakness, Marco. That's strength." The restaurant was called Lucia's, a name that made both Elena and Marco pause when they arrived. The coincidence felt like a sign, though whether good or bad remained to be seen. The owner, an elderly woman named Rosa, greeted them at the door with a familiarity that suggested she'd known Marco for years. "Marco Valenti," she said, her weathered face breaking into a smile. "It's been too long, and this must be the wife I've heard so much about." "Rosa." Marco's voice warmed in a way Elena rarely heard. "It's good to see you. This is Elena." "Beautiful," Rosa pronounced, taking Elena's hands. "And expecting, I hear. Congratulations to you both. Now come, your table is ready. Mr. Castellano arrived 10 minutes ago." She led them through the restaurant to a private room in the back, intimate and elegantly appointed. Salvatore Castellano stood when they entered, and Elena was struck by how different he looked from the broken man she'd seen in his office. He was composed now, controlled, but there was something in his eyes, a weariness that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. "Marco," Castellano said with a slight nod. "Mrs. Valenti, thank you for coming." "Salvatore." Marco's voice was carefully neutral as he pulled out Elena's chair before taking his own. "You asked for this meeting. We're here. Talk." Castellano sat, folding his hands on the table. "I owe you both an apology. The kidnapping was inexcusable. I convinced myself it was strategic, necessary, but the truth is it was the action of a desperate man who'd forgotten what he was supposed to be fighting for." "And what were you fighting for?" Marco asked. "Power, territory, pride." Castellano's smile was bitter. "All the things that don't matter when you're standing at your daughter's grave, realizing you've wasted your life on pursuits that died with her. Your wife made me see that, Made me remember who I used to be before grief and rage twisted me into something Gianna would be ashamed of. Words are easy, Marco said. I need to know this is real, that you're serious about change and not just manipulating us again. I am serious. Castellano reached into his jacket, and Elena felt Marco tense beside her, but what emerged was a folder, not a weapon. These are the details of my waterfront operations. Everything. The legitimate businesses, the questionable ones, the outright illegal ones. I'm offering you full transparency and a proposal for transformation. Marco took the folder but didn't open it yet. Why now? Why after years of competition suddenly offer cooperation? Because I'm tired, Castellano said simply. Tired of violence. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of building an empire on fear when the only person I wanted to share it with is gone. I have no children left to inherit this. No legacy worth protecting. So either I burn it all down in a final act of destruction, or I try to build something that might actually matter. Which brings us to the question of what you want, Marco said. Partnership, Castellano said. Real partnership. You help me transition my operations to legitimate enterprises. I provide the infrastructure and connections I've built over 40 years. Together, we transform the waterfront from a haven for illegal activity into something the city can be proud of. Elena watched Marco process this, saw the wheels turning as he evaluated the offer from every angle. It was generous, almost too generous, which meant either Castellano was genuine in his desire for redemption, or this was the setup of the century. And what's to stop you from using that partnership to undermine me later? Marco asked. Once you have access to my operations, my contacts, my strategies, what's to stop you from turning that against me? Nothing, Castellano admitted, except my word, which I know means very little to you right now. So I'll offer you something more concrete, a good faith gesture that proves I'm serious. He pulled out his phone, made a call, and said 2 words. Do it. Within 30 seconds, Marco's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression shifting from suspicion to shock. What is it? Elena asked. He just transferred ownership of 3 shell companies to me, Marco said slowly. Companies that control significant portions of his smuggling network. He's literally handing me the keys to dismantle his illegal operations. Consider it a down payment on trust, Castellano said. Those companies were the backbone of my contraband business. With them, you can shut down operations I've run for decades. You could destroy me financially, cut off my revenue streams, leave me with nothing. So why give them to me? Because I meant what I said. I'm done with that life. And I'm betting that you're the kind of man who'd rather build with a former enemy than destroy them. Gianna used to say that the truest measure of power was what you chose not to do with it. I'm giving you the power to end me, Marco. I'm trusting you'll choose to build instead. The silence that followed was profound. Elena held her breath, watching these 2 powerful men stare at each other across the table, the weight of decades of rivalry and months of escalation hanging between them. Finally, Marco spoke. I accept your offer. But understand this. The moment I suspect you're playing me, the moment I think this partnership is a cover for betrayal, I will use everything you've given me to bury you, permanently. No second chances, no mercy. Are we clear? Crystal, Castellano said. Then let's talk specifics. How do we transform 40 years of illegal operations into legitimate business? The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. Rosa brought food that went mostly untouched as the 3 of them, because Elena refused to be excluded from planning their future, mapped out a transformation that would reshape the city's entire waterfront district. Castellano's smuggling infrastructure would be converted to legitimate shipping and logistics. His network of informants and fixers would transition to security consulting and risk management. The protection rackets would become actual security services, properly licensed and regulated. It would take years, significant investment, and careful management of relationships with people who'd built their lives on the old system. But it was possible. More than possible. It was a blueprint for how power could shift from destruction to creation, how enemies could become partners, how redemption could be more than just a fantasy for broken men seeking absolution. There's one more thing, Castellano said as the meeting was winding down. I have information you'll want. About other organizations moving into the city. Groups that make our old rivalry look like a disagreement between gentlemen. What kind of groups? Marco asked. International syndicates, trafficking networks, people who see the vacuum left by our conflict and think they can establish operations here. Castellano's expression darkened. The same people who took Gianna, who took Lucia, who are taking daughters and sisters and mothers every single day while we waste resources fighting each other. Elena felt her blood run cold. You want to stop them. I want to destroy them, Castellano corrected. And I can't do it alone. But together, with your resources and my intelligence network, we could shut down operations that the authorities can't even find. Marco leaned back in his chair, and Elena could see the calculation in his eyes. This was the kind of work he'd done with Lucia, the kind that actually mattered, that saved lives instead of just accumulating power. You're talking about going to war, Marco said. I'm talking about doing something meaningful with the power we've accumulated, Castellano countered. I'm talking about making sure other fathers don't have to live through what we did, that other mothers don't have to bury daughters who deserved so much better than this world gave them. The pain in his voice was raw, genuine. Elena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Then we do it together, she said, looking from Castellano to Marco. All of us. We build this partnership, transform the illegal operations, and use our combined resources to actually protect people instead of exploiting them. We make our power mean something. Marco's eyes met hers, and she saw the moment he made his decision. All right, we're in. But Salvatore, this stops being about revenge and starts being about justice. We do this the right way. We don't become the monsters we're fighting. Agreed, Castellano said. The right way. Whatever that takes. They shook hands across the table, sealing a partnership that would have seemed impossible just days ago. As they stood to leave, Rosa appeared with a small package wrapped in brown paper. For the baby, she said, pressing it into Elena's hands. Something my grandmother made for her children. May it bring your family as much joy as it brought ours. Elena unwrapped it to find a delicate hand-knit blanket, soft and warm, clearly made with love by someone who understood the preciousness of new life. It's beautiful, Elena said, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you. Children are the future, Rosa said simply. They deserve a world better than the one we've built. You three, you have a chance to give them that. Don't waste it. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing what had just happened. Marco held Elena's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, an unconscious gesture that grounded them both. Did we just change everything? Elena asked finally. I think we might have, Marco admitted. Or we just made the biggest mistake of our lives and won't realize it until it's too late. Optimistic. Realistic. But Marco's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Though I'm choosing to believe you're right, that redemption is possible, that people can change, that we can build something better. We can, Elena said firmly. We already are. The transformation took time. 6 months of careful restructuring, of transitioning personnel, of converting illegal operations to legitimate businesses. Vincent Costa proved invaluable, his knowledge of Castellano's organization helping to identify which parts could be salvaged and which needed to be completely dismantled. Maria and her children thrived in their new life. Elena visited them often, watching the kids blossom in their safe neighborhood, seeing Maria's confidence grow as she succeeded in her new career. It was proof that their choices mattered, that building up was more powerful than tearing down. Elena's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Marco attended every doctor's appointment, his hand always finding hers during ultrasounds, his eyes filled with wonder when he felt the baby kick. He was transforming too, learning to balance his protective instincts with trust, his need for control with partnership. They learned they were having a daughter at the 20-week ultrasound. Marco went very quiet when the technician made the announcement, and later that night, Elena found him in what would become the nursery, his head in his hands. "Talk to me," she said gently. "A daughter," Marco said roughly. "I'm going to have a daughter in a world that's still so dangerous for young women, a world where people like the ones who took Lucia and Gianna are still operating. And I'm terrified, Elena, terrified I won't be able to protect her, that I'll fail her the way I failed everyone else." Elena sat beside him, taking his hand. "You didn't fail Lucia. You saved her, gave her 5 more years. And you're not going to fail our daughter because you won't be protecting her alone. You'll have me. You'll have an entire network of people we're building who understand that protecting children means creating a safer world, not just locking them away from danger. What if it's not enough? Then we'll deal with it when it comes, Elena said. But Marco, you can't live in fear of what might happen. You have to trust that we're doing everything we can, and that has to be enough. Our daughter deserves parents who believe in possibility, not ones paralyzed by fear. Marco pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. How did you get so wise? I married a man who taught me that strength comes in many forms, Elena said, even if he's still learning that lesson himself. The partnership with Castellanos solidified over those months. They shut down 2 trafficking operations together, providing evidence to authorities that led to dozens of arrests and the rescue of 43 victims. They converted Castellanos' shipping network to legitimate trade, creating jobs and revenue that didn't depend on exploiting the vulnerable. And slowly, carefully, they began to trust each other. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when old instincts nearly destroyed the fragile peace they'd built. But they kept choosing partnership over rivalry, construction over destruction, hope over cynicism. Elena gave birth on a cold February morning, 3 weeks before her due date. Labor came fast and hard, leaving Marco white-knuckled and terrified as he held her hand through contractions that seemed to tear her apart. "You're doing great," he kept saying, though his voice shook. "You're so strong. Just a little longer." "Easy for you to say," Elena gasped between contractions. "You're not—" Another wave of pain cut off her words. But then, after hours of struggle, their daughter arrived, tiny and perfect, and screaming with the outrage of someone who'd been evicted from comfortable accommodations before she was ready. "She's beautiful," the doctor said, placing the baby on Elena's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Elena looked down at her daughter's face. Marco's dark eyes, her own stubborn chin, a shock of black hair that stood up in all directions, and felt her heart crack open with love so intense it was almost painful. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Marco stood frozen beside the bed, staring at his daughter with an expression Elena had never seen before. Awe and terror, and love all mixed together, overwhelming in its intensity. "Do you want to hold her?" Elena asked gently. "I don't. What if I drop her? What if I hurt her?" "You won't," Elena assured him. "Come on. Meet your daughter." The nurse helped transfer the baby to Marco's arms. He held her like she was made of glass, every muscle tense with the fear of making a mistake. But as he looked down at her face, something in him visibly softened. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi there. I'm your dad. And I promise I'm going to do everything I can to give you a world worth growing up in. A world where you're safe and loved and free to become whoever you want to be." The baby opened her eyes, dark and unfocused, seeming to look right at him. And Marco made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "She's perfect," he said to Elena. "She's absolutely perfect." "She is," Elena agreed. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for months, but never settled on anything that felt right. Now, looking at their daughter, Marco spoke without hesitation. "Isabella," he said. "Isabella Lucia Valenti. After the women who showed me what real courage looks like." Elena felt tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect. She's perfect. We're perfect." The next months were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Isabella proved to be a demanding baby, colicky and particular about how she liked to be held. But Marco was patient with her in a way he'd never been with anyone else, walking her through the mansion at 3 a.m, singing Italian lullabies his mother had sung to him. Elena would wake to find them like that, Marco pacing the nursery with Isabella against his chest, his deep voice soft and tender, their daughter finally settling into sleep. He was a natural father, all his protective instincts channeled into gentle care instead of paranoid control. They had Isabella baptized in a small ceremony with just their closest people present. Vincent Costa stood as godfather, a choice that raised eyebrows but felt right to both Elena and Marco. Maria and her children came, as did Thomas and many of Marco's people who'd become family over the years. And Salvatore Castellano came, holding a gift he'd clearly agonized over, a silver locket containing a photo of his daughter, Gianna. "For when she's older," he said, his voice rough. So she knows that her parents chose hope over hatred, that they built bridges instead of walls, that they believed people could change. Marco took the locket, and the two men stood there for a moment, no longer enemies or even partners, but something more fundamental. Two fathers who'd loved and lost and found their way back to something resembling peace. "Thank you," Marco said quietly, "for everything, for giving us a chance to be better." "Thank you for taking it," Castellano replied. 6 months after Isabella's birth, Elena stood on the terrace of the Valenti mansion, watching the sun set over the city. So much had changed since that night in the hospital parking lot when Marco had found her, since the moment she'd decided to fight for their marriage instead of running from it. The waterfront was transforming, construction projects replacing abandoned warehouses, legitimate businesses moving in where smuggling operations had once thrived. The trafficking networks they'd targeted were in shambles, dozens of victims freed and being helped to rebuild their lives. And her family was whole, complicated and unconventional, built from broken pieces and second chances, but whole. Marco joined her on the terrace, carrying Isabella, who was gurgling happily in his arms. "Beautiful night," he said, sliding an arm around Elena's waist. "Beautiful life," Elena corrected, leaning into him. "That too." Marco kissed her temple. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," Elena teased. "I want to start a foundation in Isabella's name. Something that helps families affected by trafficking, that provides resources and support for survivors, that actually makes a difference." Elena turned to look at him fully. "You're serious?" "Completely. We have the resources, we have the connections, and we have the knowledge of how these networks operate. Why not use all of that to help people instead of just accumulating more power?" "Because it's exactly what you should do," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's perfect, Marco. Isabella would love it, both Isabellas." "I thought we could ask Salvatore to partner with us," Marco continued. "Make it a joint venture. Show the city that even old enemies can work together for something good." Elena kissed him, pouring every ounce of love and pride and hope into the contact. "Have I mentioned lately that I'm incredibly proud of the man you've become?" "You might have mentioned it once or twice," Marco said with a smile, "but I'm happy to hear it again." Isabella chose that moment to reach for Elena, and they passed her back and forth between them, this tiny person who represented everything they'd fought for and everything they'd built. "Do you ever regret it?" Marco asked quietly. "The chaos, the danger, the fact that our lives will never be completely normal?" "Never," Elena said firmly. "Normal is overrated. We have something better. We have real. We have honest. We have a partnership built on choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's worth more than all the normal in the world." "I love you, Marco said. "More every day. I didn't think that was possible, but you keep proving me wrong." "I love you too," Elena replied. "Even when you're being overprotective and paranoid and treating me like I'm made of glass." "You're carrying the most precious thing in my world," Marco pointed out, nodding to Isabella. "A little paranoia is justified." They stood there as darkness fell, three people who'd all been lost in their own ways and had somehow found each other. The city stretched out below them, full of possibility and danger and everything in between. But Elena wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because she'd learned that love wasn't about avoiding darkness. It was about choosing to be a light in it. And together, she and Marco were building something bright enough to illuminate even the darkest corners. Their story had started with betrayal and misunderstanding, with pain and separation and the belief that some things were too broken to fix. But it was ending with redemption and partnership, with a family built on honesty and trust, with proof that even in the darkest places, hope could take root and grow. Isabella fell asleep in Marco's arms, peaceful and safe, unaware that her very existence had transformed the lives of everyone around her. But someday, Elena thought, they'd tell her. They'd tell her how her parents had chosen each other against impossible odds, how they'd turned enemies into partners and violence into creation, how they'd proven that love really could conquer darkness, as long as you were brave enough to keep choosing it. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked, noticing her smile. "That we did it," Elena said simply. "We actually did it. Built something beautiful from the wreckage." "We did," Marco agreed. "And we're just getting started." He was right. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. The foundation they'd build would help hundreds of families. The partnership with Castellano would continue transforming the city. Isabella would grow up in a world that was safer, better, because her parents had refused to accept that violence was the only answer. And through it all, they'd have each other. Two people who'd been broken and lost and afraid, who'd found their way back to love and chosen to build something that would outlast them both. It was more than Elena had ever dreamed of when she'd walked away from her marriage, more than Marco had believed possible when he'd let her go. It was redemption, hard-won and precious. It was family, chosen and fought for. It was love, tested and proven true. And standing there on the terrace with her husband and daughter, watching the city lights come on like stars, Elena knew that every moment of pain and fear and struggle had been worth it to arrive at this perfect, imperfect, absolutely real moment. Their future stretched ahead, uncertain and challenging and full of possibility. And they would face it together, one choice at a time, one day at a time, building something worth believing in. Always together, always choosing love, always moving forward toward the light they'd created from darkness, toward the life they'd fought so hard to claim, toward home.